What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Martian MMA podcast. I am your host. My name is John, also known as the Martian, here to break down the UFC Saudi Arabia card going down this Saturday, starting at noon p.m. Eastern Time, with 11 fights, headlined by Robert Whitaker versus Ikram Aliskerov in the main event. And the UFC making their debut in, what do they call it, like the something kingdom of Saudi Arabia, the new fight capital of the world. They've been having a lot of big boxing fights over there, and they're paying everybody to come over there. They're paying the UFC to come there. And we got this card that has had a lot of hits over the past, week and a half. A lot of fights fell through. The main event got shuffled around. We had a few other fights fall through and get replaced. So this card has been a little bit of a mess. The logistics behind it, I imagine, are pretty difficult. But we still got 11 fights going down. Let's hope they all stay together. Everybody makes weight and we get those 11 fights because, going 9 fights would be pretty rough. I imagine the Saudis won't be too happy with that. So before we get into this week, just got to talk about last week real quick. I think last week was honestly not one of the best podcasts I've ever had, but definitely one of the better ones in recent memory, probably one of the best of the year. And I just think, pretty much every fight I either, nailed the dynamic pretty well or gave out winning bets. I mean, there was just a lot of winning bets mentioned. Costa sub 3, Weston Wilson money line, Weston Wilson submission round 1, Adam Fuggett money line, Almabayev decision. The Brady Highstand Armfield over 2.5 was probably the worst bet and prediction of the card. The goes the distance and the overs and the Kwamba fight both plus money. Miles Johns money line, Miles Johns decision. Unfortunately, the main event didn't go our way with Alex Perez money line, but I still think that was a very good bet. But overall, just really happy with how last week went. I think I nailed a lot of the fights, mentioned a ton of winning bets, a ton of plus money bets. Had a few people reach out and say that last week was a great card and they tailed a bunch of winning bets, so that's always good to hear. And was just really happy with how it ended up. Made a lot of units on the card. The week before that was a very bad card, the Imavov Cannonier card. So it was really good to have a big bounce back card. And I'm glad to hear some people were able to enjoy the podcast and make some good winning bets as well. And let's hope we keep the ball rolling with that this week, because this week's card, it doesn't stand out as a great card, but I definitely think there are a few compelling fights. Definitely some betting angles we're going to be looking to attack here, and I'm looking forward to it after looking into these fights a little bit more. These fights are fights you have to look into more because a lot of these fighters are either inexperienced or don't fight that often, and there's just a lot of uncertainty with a lot of these fighters. Some more reputable names that we're comfortable with Whitaker, Volkov, Gastelum, Hackpress, Gordon, but a lot of guys that are pretty new to the UFC and have either just a few fights, some guys making their debuts, a lot of fighters making their debut in this card. 5 fighters making their UFC debut out of 22. So I did some research on this card, and we're going to go ahead and get right into these fights. And the first fight of the night is probably the fight I'm most excited to talk about. I cannot wait for this one. In the bantamweight division, we have Long Zhao taking on Chang Ho Lee. The odds for this one have it near pick'em. BetOnline has it minus 112 for Long right now, with Chang Ho Lee coming back at minus 108. This fight is a very particular type of fight that I love betting on, and I don't think we've had one in a while. So you're going to be looking for a low-level fight where it's a grappler, but a bad grappler, versus a guy who has decent defensive grappling, but also not good enough defensive grappling to the point where he's going to make it easy. So in this fight, Chang Ho Lee is going to be pursuing takedowns pretty hard. That's what he does. But I think his wrestling and his grappling in general are pretty bad. And Long Zhao, I think, has a good idea of how to defend takedowns, how to get off bottom, how to land strikes and punish grapplers when he's fighting them. But he also isn't, perfect at defending the takedown. So there are going to be moments where he's struggling here or gets taken down, but I think he's going to battle back up to the feet. He's going to get some distance, and he's going to be the one landing strikes. And both of his fights on the road to the UFC were pretty similar fights to this, where he was defending a lot of takedowns. He was in close fights, split and a majority decision. But in those fights, he was the one landing the hard strikes. He was the one pouring it on late in the fight, especially that most recent fight against a guy by the name of Shuya. He would just absolutely lit him up in the third round there. So I like Long here because I think his defensive grappling is good enough not to get stuck on bottom for long periods, and he lands more strikes. I like his cardio. He's been in this type of fight before. He has way, way more experience than Chang Ho Lee, and I love Long Xiao at this near pick'em odds. Already have him for 1.5 units. I might even add a little more. I wouldn't recommend going too crazy because, this is a low-level fight, but man, this just feels like a fight I want to have action on, and I know that Long Xiao is the right side in this fight deep down in my heart, and I cannot wait to watch this one unfold in the first fight of the card, and it's going to kick the card off to a great start. And the next fight we have in the light heavyweight division, Magomed, I forget how to say his last name, Gadjiulov or something, taking on Brendan Ribeiro. Odds for this one have Magomed as the favorite, -335. Ribeiro coming back +275. So the line's probably about right here. I'm not too interested in fading Magomed here. The guy does seem like a potent offensive striker. He has ability to hit takedowns. He had a lot of takedowns in his Contender Series fight, and he did slow down in that fight. He did look pretty tired in the third round, but still won it pretty comfortably as well. And a lot of his fights are over really bad competition, right? I mean, up until just a few fights ago, he was fighting guys with 0-0 records, 2-1 records. So definitely has a pretty padded record, but he also does look pretty legit at the same time. Has a big IMMAF experience, the amateurs where they have pretty good strength of schedule over there. So I definitely think the guy's a legit prospect, and Ribeiro is not a total bum, but the guy has his weaknesses. I mean, I think his offensive striking is solid, but his defense is lacking. We saw him just get put out by a nasty combo by Mingyang Zhang. Ribeiro does have a lot of submissions on his record as well, so if the fight gets into the second and third round and he's able to outlast Magomed a little bit and maybe take over with his cardio and expose that lackluster cardio of Magomed that we saw in the Contender Series, there's a chance Ribeiro can come back for a second or third round finish here, but I don't think so, man. It's not like the guy's a proven cardio asset himself. The guy's only been to the decision one time, and he lost that fight. And he hasn't even been in the third round outside that one decision. All of his other fights are in the second and third round. So it's not like this guy is a proven cardio commodity to be fading here. So I just think Magomed will win this one. I don't really have a betting angle on that one. And we're moving on back to the bantamweight division. Muin Gafurov taking on Kyung Ho Kang. Men's bantamweight division. No women's fights not allowed in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. And here we have Gafurov as the favorite, -160. Kang coming back +140. I have Kang as my side here, man. I don't think Gafurov is really any good. And even though Kang is up there in age, he's been fighting forever. He's 36 now. Had a little bit of a hiatus for his military service. He's been in the UFC for almost 10 years. No, over 10 years. That's insane. I feel like he's probably one of the most unknown guys for being in the UFC 10 years. But we've talked about him a lot on the podcast before, and I definitely rate his skills higher than most do. And I think the guy is just a really skilled striker and grappler, but he doesn't have great physicality for the weight class. He is a little bit noodly, but I just don't see where Gafurov has a clear edge over him, man. Gafurov loves winging big hooks, but Kang has good straight shots, man. He has good straight punches, a jab, straight right hand that he rocked Quinones with not too long ago. And then he's got really slick jiu-jitsu and grappling transitions as well. So I just have a hard time seeing where Gafurov has any edge here. He has maybe potential to start a little faster and, wing some big shots and, try to start fast and catch Kang cold early on. But the longer the fight goes, man, I think it favors Kang. I mean, Gafurov is 1-5 in decisions in his entire career. And I just think that there's a good chance that he slows down here. And I also just think there's a good chance that Gafurov gets countered here. He's going to be winging those big wild hooks, getting aggressive early. And Kang might do something similar like he did to Quinones and just land a straight shot right down the middle. And he has that good transitional grappling and ability to submit you after he hurts you too. So I like Kang money line here. And I haven't looked at the props for this one as well, but not going to go ahead and go into them now, but I just think that the best bet of the fight is very likely to be Kang moneyline. I'm taking a glance at the props. Nothing catching my eye here. So we're moving on to the welterweight division, where we have Rinat Fakhretdinov taking on Nicolas Dalby, and Rinat is the favorite at -350, Dalby plus 285. I cannot lay this juice on Rinat after what we just saw, man. I mean, we just saw him fight Zaleski dos Santos and slow down in the third round, and I just think he got exposed in a lot of different ways there. His striking, he doesn't have, good consistent striking. When he's stuck on the feet for long periods of time, you start to see his technique isn't so clean. He doesn't have a whole lot of ideas. With his grappling as well, we know he's a relentless grappler who can shoot a lot of takedowns, but his control isn't that great. He doesn't do a whole lot after the takedowns. He doesn't get really dominant positions, and I think that's just going to lead to a lot of his fights being fights where he takes guys down, they get up, he takes them down again, and that's going to use a lot of his gas tank, and that could lead to him slowing down like we just saw. Maybe that was just a really bad training camp or something was wrong with Rinat into that fight, because the Bryant Battle fight, he showed much better cardio, but Battle made him work less than Zaleski did. And Nicolas Dalby is just known for making fighters work, man. This guy, even though he's not the most, technical fighter, he has great heart, he has great cardio, and he's never going to give up in there. So even if he's getting taken down, I think he's going to be working his way back up. And I just was really unimpressed with Rinat's control game. So I think Dalby will make Rinat work and has a good chance of coming back in the second half of the fight. Wouldn't knock anybody for taking Dalby moneyline before the fight, because I do think the line is wide. But before the fight, you also probably got to take Dalby round 2, Dalby round 3. And just be ready for that Dalby live bet, because he's known for coming back in fights. He's known for struggling a little early, starting a little slow, but he kicks into that second gear. He starts working, and he's good at, working into the fights as they go. Also saw somebody point out that he's good as an underdog. I think he's 5-1 in his past 6 fights as the underdog. A big underdog in some of them, 3-4-1 a dog, especially in his last fight against Bonfim. And flew down to Brazil, fought Bonfim, who was undefeated, and just put him through the ringer and, got out grappled for a round. So what? He beat Bonfim's ass and finished him in the second round there. And this is no new situation to Dalby. He's known for going into enemy territory and, being a tough out. So I think he will do that here. I definitely don't think Rinat is justifying over 75% here. And if I were looking to play Rinat in any way, it would be by decision, which I'm sure is the most likely outcome according to the odds. Yes, it is. Even money. That's shit, man. Don't even try to play that. And the odds on Dalby 1,600. That's on BetOnline as of right now. Wait to see if they open up at better prices, which they almost certainly will. And hopefully Dalby can pull it off, man. We're moving on to the featherweight division, where we have short notice replacement Felipe Lima taking on Muhammad Naimov. To this one, I have a near pick'em with Lima as the slight favorite, now -113. Naimov coming back -107. Good fight here. We got Lima, who is a Octagon champion, right? Yep, Octagon 135 champion, had a good 5-round fight last July. Was preparing for a rematch in July 20th. Gets the short notice call. He's fighting about 4 weeks earlier. He's going up a weight class. So you got to think that the intangibles here favor Naimov. He's the more natural 145er. He had more time to prepare for this fight. However, he's getting his opponent switched up. It was supposed to be Melsik Baghdasaryan, who's a predominant kickboxer striker. And now he's getting a much more well-rounded fighter in Felipe Lima. And sometimes these late notice replacements are, most of the time, I would say, they favor the guy coming into the UFC and getting their opportunity, because they got this great opportunity presented to them out of nowhere. It's a big moment for them. And we were just in the same position not too long ago with Naimov. It was Jamie Mullarkey supposed to fight somebody, I'm not sure who. Naimov gets the call on short notice and gets the knockout in the second round there after a slow start. So sometimes just switching up opponents is tricky, man. So I think this is a much tougher fight for Naimov than Melsik, despite the odds being just about the same. And, Lima was a solid fighter that I saw on tape. Only about 3 fights of his available, but the guy is a skilled and capable striker and grappler. He has good cardio. He has good intensity and activity in these fights. Got 5-round experience in his last one. And I think the guy's going to be game, man. I think when they're on the feet, it's going to be a lot of big swings from both. They both have pretty wild striking styles where they like winging overhands and left hooks. They don't really throw too many soft strikes. These guys aren't very, leg kick and jab heavy fighters. These guys like getting after it on the feet. And on the ground, both of them, I believe, would be capable of taking each other down. But I think Lima has pretty good ability to scramble and to work his way off a bottom. There's a chance that Naimov is just a little too big and strong and might get some takedowns that way. But I don't think Naimov has any good jiu-jitsu or guard passing or ground and pound. I don't think he does much with his takedowns at all. So we know Naimov slows down as well. The round 3 versus Nathaniel Wood, not a good look. He even got dropped in the first round by Wood there. I think Naimov's chin is a little weak, so it's a winnable fight for Lima, man. I wouldn't knock. I would say the pick'em price is about right. I'll probably be looking to jump in on Lima. On the live bets here, maybe look at Lima round 2, round 3 decision. Because I think round 3 really favors Lima here, man. I was impressed with this guy's cardio and work rate, and I think if it gets to that third round, it should favor Lima. I think the first round should favor Naimov because he's going to be bigger, stronger. He has a little bit more punching power, I would say, of the two of them. So I think that could favor him to getting out to an early lead. So it's going to be a competitive fight, man. Early on, I was thinking, oh, man, this should be Naimov. But the more I watched of Lima and the more I refreshed my mind on some of Naimov's fight, I think Pick'em is probably about fair here. And I'm looking forward to that one, man. It's a good fight. I'll go with Lima to pull off the win. I would call it a little bit of an upset considering it's such short notice. But the odds have it near Pick'em for a reason. The market is probably on the right track here. So I like that one there. And we're moving on to the last prelim in the lightweight division. Nasrat Haqparast taking on Jared Gordon. Odds for this one have Nasrat as the favorite, minus 230. Jared Gordon coming back plus 195. Big fan of Gordon, not so much a fan of Nasrat, but I don't have any real reason to dislike Nasrat. He's a fairly, one-dimensional fighter, just a southpaw boxer, pretty much a headhunter. But the guy is good at that. He's quick. He has good eye for exchanges, has good output cardio, fairly durable himself too. Even, got knocked out, I think, once, right, by Dober. But other than that, has looked durable throughout his career. And he's coming off a few good wins, a few clear wins, knocked down Malarkey quick, put up a huge volume versus Quinones, had a clear decision over Makdessi in an impressive win as well. And I just think that the speed here is the biggest thing, man. I just see how is Jared Gordon going to get past the speed, the hand speed, the footwork of Nasrat Haqparast. I just think Jared is a little slow here. I mean, He's a good amount older, right? I don't know how much, but I would guess about 7 years, honestly, if just going off the top of my mind. 35 for Gordon, coming back with, yep, exactly. What a guess. Nailed it. But in a fight that you expect to be mostly striking, right? The much younger guy who's going to pump out strikes, who's quicker, who has quicker hands, throws in combinations more often, I think he's the rightful favorite. I don't really see anything too wrong with the grappling here. I imagine Jared Gordon's going to need some huge moment of maybe a knockdown or a big takedown where he does good work on top, but I don't think his wrestling is really good enough to think that he's going to use it here against Nasrat. So I think the odds are about right. I think this one should very likely hit the scorecards. Jared Gordon is incredible in decisions. He's 11-1 in his career, with the one loss being the Paddy Pimblett fight, a widely agreed upon robbery there. So he really should be undefeated, 12-0 in decisions when it comes to that. So the guy doesn't lose decisions ever, but I think he's probably going to here. The odds definitely have Nasrat decision as the most likely outcome. They have Nasrat KO at plus 170, 225 on books. I don't agree with that, man. I mean, Jared is a little hittable, has been knocked out before a few times, but I just think that line is off. So, Nasrat decision, I would say, is the better prop stab of the two. Goes the distance is at minus 180. I think that's about fair. So, yeah, the lines I think are pretty on point there, I would say Nasrat by decision would be the only betting angle I would be looking at, but yeah, it's unfortunate. I don't think Jared is going to be able to pull that one off. So we're moving on to the main card, 5-fight main card here. In the light heavyweight division, kicking it off, we got Johnny Walker taking on Volkan Ozdemir. Odds have another near pick'em here where we have Walker slight favorite, minus 113, coming back Ozdemir minus 107. Man, what a funny fight here. I mean, Johnny Walker at near pick'em odds is just almost, it seems like never a good bet. Because skill wise, obviously Volkan Ozdemir is the more skilled fighter. He has the better wins at 205, not by actually a massive margin, but he does have the better wins at 205. And Johnny Walker is just, we know what he is. He's a jank meme fighter. He has a bunch of, stupid finishes in a lot of his fights. Not really a super functional fighter. And I got to go with Volkan here, man. I got to go with Volkan. Yes, Johnny Walker could land some sort of goofy finish like he has done time and time again. But at a near pick'em price, at a near 50-50 price, I'm going with the fighter who I think is more skilled, who has more ways to win the fight, who the longer the fight goes, I think it favors him more. And I'm just going with the more functional fighter here over the more janky, high variance fighter in Johnny Walker. It's hard to, it's really hard to cap this fight, right? I mean, it's hard to cap all Johnny Walker's fights. But when it's standing, Johnny Walker barely throws strikes anymore. Volkan Ozdemir should be able to get off some strikes, some leg kicks, some punches to the head. Should be able to possibly even take Johnny Walker down if he wants to. And yeah, man, Volkan's got his own good amount of power himself. So Johnny Walker has a pretty weak chin. It's been cracked plenty of times in his career, and I wouldn't even rule out Volkan cracking him and possibly hurting and knocking out Johnny Walker here. So yeah, Volkan's my pick at Pick'em. Either guy who wins this fight is probably going to look like a hindsight big favorite, but I'm going with the Swiss Volkan Ozdemir here. Sticking in the Premier Division next, Shara Magomedov taking on Antonio Tricoli. Odds for this one have Shara as the favorite, minus 700. Tricoli coming back plus 500. Another goofy fight here, man. Shara is a good striker, nasty kicker, but the guy sucks at wrestling. We know he's easy to take down. We know he's easy to keep on his back. Tricoli, we barely know shit about this guy. There's only a few fights of his that are available. I talked about him last week on the podcast, even though his fight got canceled. But he's had 6 minutes of fight time in the past 5 years. He's had 2 fights in 5 years, and those fights went 6 minutes, where he took guys down and he submitted them quickly. Bums. So we know he can take guys down. We know he's looking to take people down, and we know that Shara is a bad defensive grappler, and Bruno Silva hit a bunch of takedowns on him easily, and Bruno Silva kept those takedowns easily. Shara was just content to lay on his back and didn't do shit, and that fight, Shara technically won 30-27, but that fight proved that he is a horrible grappler. So you're getting a horrible grappler at minus 700 versus a guy who is going to grapple at plus 500. Who knows how good Tricoli is as a grappler? Who knows how durable he is? But this is just a high variance, huge uncertainty fight, and at plus 500 for a grappler versus a bad grappler, yeah, I would not knock a play on Tricoli. I think he's worth a small bet at 5-1. Play that one lightly though, because the uncertainty there is just off the charts. But yeah, Tricoli, maybe Tricoli by sub when that line comes out. Let's look for it. Next fight is, it says on the welterweight on Tapology, but it's actually in the middleweight division now. Sticking in the Premier Division, Kelvin Gastelum, Daniel Rodriguez. Odds for this one have Kelvin minus 230, Daniel Rodriguez coming back plus 195. We have a lot of fights in that range. We have like a few pick'em fights, and then we have a few fights that are like 70-75%. Weird matchmaking on this card. But Kelvin, yeah, he should win the fight here, I guess, man. But man, this is just a unappealing fight. I mean, this fight is very, very likely to go the distance. The odds have it at minus 225 to go the distance. That's still probably value. We know Kelvin Gastelum has an indestructible chin, one of the toughest sons of bitches of all time, and Daniel Rodriguez, on the other hand, just got knocked out in his last fight. I would guess that Kelvin winning by knockout is the most likely finish here, but Kelvin also hasn't won by knockout since the Michael Bisping fight in 2017, 7 years ago. He's had his fair share of good opponents and high-intensity fights where he landed a lot of big shots and rocked guys, but hasn't actually translated on the finish in 7 years. So I see why the goes the distance line is as is what it is. And Kelvin Gastelum also might mix in some wrestling here. We have seen him do that at times in the past. He certainly doesn't do it reliably, but if Kelvin does mix in the wrestling here, I think he will have some success. I certainly don't think it's going to translate to any type of finish like a submission for Kelvin. So, and then Daniel Rodriguez, if he's winning the fight, if he's landing his strikes in the feet from his southpaw strikes with his straight punches, and he's certainly not knocking out Kelvin Gastelum with his block head. So, I think Kelvin KO is just the only finish I could possibly see here. And Kelvin 70%, there's no way that's a good bet. He asked to have this fight moved to 185. That's a huge benefit for him. He's going to have to cut way less weight. It probably means that his training camp didn't go so well, his diet didn't go so well. So it could be a sign that he's just not really physically or mentally fit for this fight. But Daniel Rodriguez is 38 years old now, man? 37? Turning 38 at the end of the year. He just got knocked out. He slowed down and got finished from the Neil Magny fight. The Li Jingliang fight wasn't even a super clear decision for him. That was a kind of a controversial decision. So Daniel Rodriguez hasn't been looking hot lately. And this is going to likely be just a southpaw versus southpaw striking fight. And Kelvin Gastelum is the much harder puncher of the two, has fought much better competition. And is the better fighter over his career. So I guess Kelvin Gastelum by decision is going to be the official pick, but I don't really see any bets that really jump off the page there. The goes the distance I mentioned, I think, is probably the best angle, but laying over, 2-1 is never, an easy click, I think, especially on a prop. So I don't love anything there. We're moving on to the heavyweight division in the co-main event. Sergey Pavlovich taking on Alexander Volkov, a Russian heavyweight showdown here where we have Pavlovich minus 235 coming back with Volkov at 2-1. So these guys trained together before, they sparred together before. Volkov very candid and just said, yeah, I used to spar this guy and he used to knock me the fuck out. And he's like, I used to start sparring and then I'd wake up in the locker room. Like he's very, very honest in saying like, this dude used to fuck me up in sparring. And it's going to be interesting to see how it translates to the real fight here, because obviously the outcome everyone is thinking about here is Pavlovich just bum rushes him, unleashes a combination of punches, knocks him out. But man, Volkov, he's a really, really skilled striker of his own right. This guy knows how to keep distance. He has outstruck a ton of guys. He's on a good run right now, right? He's 3-0. Finished all three guys, looked solid in all three of them. They're all kind of, bummy guys, but it's heavyweight after all. So, and then Pavlovich, who the hell knows how he's going to look past a few minutes? The guy hasn't fought out of round one in fucking forever. 2017. It's been 7 years since he's been out of round one. 9 fights of his since he's been out of the first round. And in the UFC, he hasn't even been past 4 minutes. So, he obviously could just steamroll Pavlovich and make it look easy here, or he could steamroll Volkov and make it look easy, but he also could look very poorly just at a moment's notice. We saw him get taken down and stuck on bottom versus Overeem. If Volkov can somehow end up on top here, that's going to be bad for Pavlovich. If Volkov can fight a little safe and try to keep distance and clinch up and kill some clock and extend the fight, it's very likely that Pavlovich isn't going to look good in the second and third. So Volkov has more ways to win the fight. Sergey winning the fight seems very, very correlated to him winning in the first round by knockout. I find it hard to believe Sergey will win any other way. So putting him at 70% when his win condition is kind of limited to an early finish, I think is probably wrong, but you're better off just waiting and live betting here, man. Wait to see how the bum rush goes. If Pavlovich melts him in the first minute or two, okay, you avoided losing any money on the fight. But if Volkov is fighting smart and he's limiting the exchanges, he's not getting trapped in the pocket, he's not getting trapped against the cage, then go ahead and throw in a live bet on Volkov and hope for the best. So I hope Volkov wins the fight. I think he's the cooler fighter of the two, and getting a little redemption for those sparring sessions would be cool. And I hope Volkov wins, but I don't have any really strong conviction on him to actually do so. There's a very, very strong chance that he gets melted in the first year. So moving on to the main event in the Premier Division, 185, where we have Robert Whittaker taking on Ikram Aliskerov, and a bit of a short notice thrown together main event here. Was supposed to be Robert Whittaker taking on Hamzat Chimaev. Instead, Ikram is filling in on just about 10 days' notice. Ikram was in the middle of cutting weight to fight Tricoli. Then he gets the call. He's stopped his weight cut. He flew, halfway across the world. Now he's got to cut weight again. Got to wonder how that's going to factor in. He was obviously preparing for a 3-round fight against a fucking bum in Tricoli. And now he's fighting, top 5 middleweight ever, Robert Whittaker, in a 5-round fight. Huge change for Ikram there. But it's also a huge opportunity for Ikram. He was going from fighting Warlley Alves and Tricoli, unranked bums, and now he's getting catapulted to the number 3 fighter in the division. So this is a huge opportunity for him. He does have a lot of risks and uncertainty involved with it, but it's probably worth the risk for Ikram here. So rewatching the fights of Ikram, before the UFC, he was trying to take everybody down. He was grappling very heavily in these fights. Then he got to the UFC. He fought Phil Hawes. He fought Warlley Alves. Not really two dangerous fighters, and he was content to strike with them. Looked like a dangerous, capable striker. So the guy is definitely, capable and well-rounded. He can grapple. He can strike. I don't think he's very skilled, very elite at either, I should say. He's not super disciplined with either. I think he does slow down pretty clearly in his fights. The Nashon Burrell fight, he definitely slowed down in the 3rd round there and lost that fight. Does have a few 3rd-round finishes recent on his record, but those are over bad fighters. Dennis Talulin, the legend, being one of them. So you got to wonder, what is his path going to be? What is his game plan going to be here? Because if he tries to take Robert Whittaker down, it's probably going to go poorly, because Robert Whittaker, as we all know, one of the best defensive wrestlers of all time. We got to wonder, does he still have it? Because we did see him get taken down by Dricus du Plessis in their fight, but, historically, career-wise, his takedown defense has been phenomenal. And if he tries to take Robert down, he might get a takedown, but what's he going to do with it, man? This guy's top game is very reliant on the Kimura. He's not going to Kimura Robert Whittaker. Okay, so if he gets those takedowns, I think he's going to use some energy getting them. And then I don't think he's going to do a whole lot on top with them. So I think that's going to lead to him slowing down as the fight goes on. And if he strikes, we just don't really have a clear idea of how good of a striker Ikram is, because we saw him knock out 2 lower-level guys. He looked, offensively potent and skilled in those fights, but, anybody can look good against those 2 guys, Warlley Alves and Phil Hawes. So I don't think those fights are super indicative, and I got to imagine the longer the fight goes, just the more and more favors Robert Whittaker. He's the one with the 5-round experience. He's the one who's been training for 5 rounds. He's the one who's been in the 3rd round much more recently. Ikram hasn't even been to the decision. He's been to the decision once in his past, 13 fights or something like that. And as I mentioned, it was a 2-1 decision over Nashon Burrell, where he slowed down in that fight. And Nashon Burrell's just a regional journeyman, He's from the Northeast, I believe. I'm not trying to disparage the guy, but yeah, he's 19-12 in his career. He's a local journeyman. So I don't think what he did in that fight was super impressive, and I don't think anything really Ikram has done has really impressed me, and nothing he's done has warranted giving him a 40% chance to beat Robert Whittaker. So this seems like it really does seem like a fight that Robert Whittaker should win fairly easily. The odds only have him at 60%, which means the market is respecting Ikram. I'm not really respecting him that much. I think if, Whittaker was closer to -230 here, I really wouldn't disagree with it. But there are times where when a fight seems simple and I'm, very confident, then the fights are actually much more complicated than what I'm making it out to be. That could be what we're experiencing here, but I'm choosing to believe that Robert Whittaker will win the fight without a whole lot of difficulty, and really run away with it once the fight hits the 3rd, 4th, and 5th round. Maybe even getting a finish later on there for Whittaker. But we know these middleweight main events love to go the distance. So I think Rob moneyline before the fight is a fine wager. But I would really be looking to jump in on Rob live, because I just think that his experience and his cardio should really sway him the fight later on. So let's hope Ikram has an early moment, an early, big shot he lands, an early takedown, and the live line starts overreacting, and we can get Robert Whittaker at plus money. That would be a really big line I would like to jump in on live. And that'll do it. I'll pick Robert Whittaker KO round 4 as the official prediction. Yeah, so a lot of thoughts on these fights. I looked into these one a lot. So I watched a lot of tape on them. Didn't come away with a ton of definitive bets that I'll be stamping, but I'll run through them. I like Long Zhao money line is the bet I'm stamping the most. We're starting things off. First fight of the night. Two UFC debutants. Two Asian grapplers, lower level guys. It's a bit of a crazy fight to plant your flag on, but I'm fucking doing it, and I'm doing it proudly on Long Zhao. Love that bet. Then we're sticking with the Asians in Kyung Ho Kang money line. I like that. Going to be taking some Nicholas Dalby round 2, round 3 angle, looking to jump in on him live. Might end up on Nasrat Haqparast by decision. I like Volkan Ozdemir at the pick'em price. I like some Felipe Lima late round props, 2-3 props, maybe 3 decision, and jump in on him live. Small stab on Tricoli money line at 5-1. And Alexander Volkov round 2, round 3. I like those. And Robert Whitaker in some fashion. I don't know if I'm going to get in on him pre-fight or wait to get in on money line or play the late round props like I just mentioned. So the bets that I'm stamping confidently are Long Zhao, Kyung Ho Kang, Volkan Ozdemir. Those are my 3. 2 pick'em bets, 1+ money bet. And we're riding with those guys here. So an interesting little card in Saudi Arabia here. I imagine the king or whatever the fuck he isn't too happy with how this card turned out, but maybe it'll be the start of a long and fruitful relationship between the UFC and Saudi Arabia, like is going on with boxing and the WWE and whatnot. So that'll do it. Coming off a good week last week, let's keep the ball rolling and win some more wagers this week. We got UFC 303 and a huge card, International Fight Week next week, so we'll be back in action for that. And thank you all for listening. Hope you all enjoyed the podcast. Hope you all win some bets and enjoy the fights this weekend. We will see you all next week. Peace out.